Anthony Joshua's attempt to stare out Oleksandr Usyk at their press conference in Saudi Arabia failed, backfired in spectacular fashion. Now, normally when I watch a press conference between two experienced fighters like this, I don't really read much into the stare down, because with a pair of veterans, and even though we talk about Anthony Joshua needing to learn a lot at this stage of his career, he's a veteran. So normally with a pair of veterans, the stare down is just about a photo opportunity for the press and to create some excitement for the fans. It doesn't really mean much in terms of the psychology of the two fighters in most instances. But in this case, I feel like it could be different, because AJ made a point of trying to outstare Oleksandr Usyk, because this is all part of his new mindset, right? Having the eye of the tiger, being this vicious killer in the rematch that he wasn't in the first fight. So he went in there clearly with the intention of having Usyk look away first, but it didn't work out like that. After a stare down that lasted several minutes, it was AJ that looked away, and Usyk continued to stare at him for several seconds afterwards. Now, when you contrast this with the first fight stare down at their press conference in the UK, AJ simply nodded at Usyk, and Usyk looked down, shook AJ's hand, and then that was the stare down done. I'm not sure whether it even lasted 1 minute, the stare down for the first fight. So this was the typical kind of thing that you expect from a pair of veterans. AJ's had how many world title fights now? Like 10 or something? Usyk's had a load of world title fights, both lots of experience. So there was really no needle there. Little bit of a stare down, show for the fans and photo up for the press. And then, yeah, AJ makes a gesture, they shake hands and whatever, it's over. But in this instance, AJ was gesturing to Usyk to look away once the stare down had been going on for quite some time. AJ's like gesturing to him, look away, look that way. And Usyk wouldn't look away. Usyk, I've seen him involved in several stare downs in the past. And when somebody tries to get macho with him, he'll match you for macho-ness. He'll do that. We saw that with the Derek Chisora fight. Now, how much significance is there to this? Does this mean that Usyk has actually broken AJ mentally before the fight? I'm not necessarily going to go that far, but as I say, when you go into a stare down with the intent of trying to make the other guy look away, and this is all part of your new attitude and your eye of the tiger and rekindling your old killer instinct, when you go in there with that intent and it doesn't work, it backfires, maybe it can put little doubts in your head. You know, it's possible, because this wasn't just about AJ trying to convince the crowd or intimidate Usyk. This was also about AJ trying to convince himself that he has what it takes mentally to overcome this challenge. The fact that he looked away first, does that mean that AJ failed to convince himself? Does that mean that there were doubts creeping in already? How deep does AJ's belief really go? We have to wait and see on fight night. But I thought it was pretty amusing that AJ was trying to do all this macho stare down stuff and it backfired on him. I've got no issue with him trying it, of course. It is what it is. Now, in terms of the press conference, what was said and what have you, it was typical fare. Usyk spoke mostly through an interpreter, so that was what that was. He just talked about how grateful he is to be in Saudi Arabia and this, that, and the other, and he thanked everybody through the interpreter. And AJ, again, just doing the usual thing, going through the motions, sounding like he just read a Les Brown book before he stepped onto the stage with all this philosophical talk. It's all well and good, but it does sound a bit scripted. In fact, when Eddie Hearn was asking AJ questions, they really weren't questions. It was Eddie Hearn monologuing and telling AJ how he feels and how he felt after his previous losses, and then just asking AJ at the end, do you agree? I mean, Eddie Hearn was basically doing the job of a teleprompter for AJ, telling him exactly what he thought and felt and so on, and just saying, do you agree? Oh yeah, I agree. That's how bad it was. people say that AJ is programmed, and I would definitely say that he is, at least as a fighter. Some people might even say outside the ring, but as a fighter, he's one of these guys that he has a decent boxing IQ, but it's not elite. It's not Tyson Fury ring IQ. It's not Mayweather ring IQ. It's not Andre Ward. Do you know what I mean? He's a guy that needs guidance. He's a guy that is on rails a little bit in a boxing ring rather than being able to figure it out for himself. You see it? Now, when it comes to this rematch with Usyk specifically, him being programmed isn't necessarily a bad thing if they can program him correctly. If the programming can penetrate deep enough into his subconscious, it could actually work, because there isn't enough time, in my estimation, for AJ to learn the technical things necessary to beat Usyk in a long-range fashion. He's going to have to go in there, bish, bash, bosh, and try and knock the guy out, try and hurt him, try and bully him, fight a big man fight, be a little bit crude, be a little bit rough and dirty. That's the kind of fight, in my head, and I guess in the minds of most people, that AJ is going to need to fight here. And in order to fight that kind of fight, you have to ready yourself psychologically, because you might have to walk through fire. You might get hurt. You might get dropped. And therefore, being programmed psychologically, like a Manchurian candidate, right? Programmed to kill. And I mean that in the figurative sense, right? Not literally. Programmed to seek and destroy. That might actually work rather than thinking too much. You want AJ to go in there and be a machine like the Terminator who's just marching forward, not completely reckless, but he has to have that kind of mentality that no matter what he gets hit with, he's going to keep on trying to hurt the guy. He's going to keep trying to impose his physical size on the guy, just like Tyson Fury when he fought Steve Cunningham. No retreat, no surrender. That was his mentality, and he got it done. So if they can program AJ with that type of mindset for this fight, there's the possibility that it could actually work well for him. You know, I remember Mike Tyson in an interview some years ago talking about how Customado had him programmed like a dog, where when Cuss said bite, he would bite. And again, I don't think he meant that literally, but you know what I mean. And so that's what is required in certain instances. It's almost like the military. When you have a higher ranking person in the military speaking to the subordinates, they do exactly what he says. When he says shoot, they shoot. They don't ask questions. When he says swim that river or climb that mountain, they do it. It's that level of programming that certainly Customado had at one time over Mike Tyson, and perhaps it's that level of programming which AJ's team will need to have over him in order to get him to be successful over Oleksandr Usyk. Again, this is not a fight where obviously you want a guy to be able to think for himself to some degree, but in this fight here, he needs to be kept in the right mindset of seek and destroy the whole time, no matter what happens. Seek and destroy. You know what I mean? And therefore being a bit programmed might help in this. I'm repeating myself at this point. You get what I'm saying here. So let me know what you think in the comments below. And before I conclude the video, I do want to just say a few things about this individual here, who is the president of, I guess, the Saudi Boxing Commission. I can't remember the exact title, but he was talking about how there's been an explosion in interest in boxing and participation. Loads of boxing gyms have opened up in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia since that rematch with AJ and Ruiz. And I talked about this in a previous video. I said that back in the 1970s, when two Americans, Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, fought in the Philippines, in Manila, it had a massive impact on young people in that country. And Manny Pacquiao is actually a product of that. I think he was too young to have remembered the Thriller in Manila. It might have been a year or two before he was born, I'm not sure. But that fight, that event had a huge impact on the Philippines. Just ask any Filipino people who are of that age, and they'll tell you that what I'm saying is true. It had a huge impact, and it inspired so many people to take up the sport. Boxing gyms were opening up and all this kind of thing. A fight between two Americans, right? So a similar thing, perhaps not as great an impact, but something similar here with AJ Ruiz too in Saudi Arabia. And this won't just inspire young Saudi kids to take up boxing, but also people further afield in that same region. They're going to look at Saudi Arabia, and if they have certain successful fighters coming out of there, then they're going to want to do the same thing. This is how it works. Okay, so as much as Bob Arum says it's bad for two, let's say, British, and in this case with Usyk, Ukrainian fighters or American fighters, to not be fighting in their home countries, but instead fighting overseas in some territory which isn't really synonymous with boxing or for boxing, as much as that might hurt boxing in the native countries of these people, it helps boxing worldwide. It popularizes it in a new and different territory. You see? So Bob Arum does have a point on one hand, but he's also forgetting something on the other hand. So that's my take on it. Let me know your take in the comment section below about everything I've spoken about in this video. If you're tired of the biased narratives and mass censorship on mainstream platforms, and you want to be part of a community of critical thinkers who love free speech just as much as you do, then come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide variety of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&As, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got an Element group where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. Unlike Discord, it has full end-to-end encryption, is decentralized, and it's 100% censorship free. You can also send voice notes as well as much larger audio and video files than you can on Discord. So come and sign up on Patreon. There's no contract, there's no commitment. You can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a cup of coffee. So I'll see you over there. I'm out.